Hi, and welcome to the CRE Chat Live podcast. I'm Casey.
Hey, I'm Melissa.
And thanks for tuning in. This is our second podcast that we're doing, and it's we're covering one of our CRE chats that we did for June. So, Melissa, do you want to tell us about CRE Chat from Twitter, and then we'll introduce our guest host?
Yeah, absolutely, Casey. Thanks. So, if anybody out there is not familiar with CRE Chat, we are a live Twitter chat that happens once a month on typically the third or fourth Thursday in the month, 7:30 Central. And typically on the CRE Chat, we cover a topic. The topic we covered this month was Millennials in CRE, which will bring us to our special guest host, Kathleen Demon, who's here. Say hey, Kathleen.
Hey, everybody.
Kathleen is a noted expert on millennials. So typically on the chats, we cover an array of questions around a topic. And what we are doing now is we're launching a series of podcasts to kind of take a look back at the chat and kind of recap the chat and go a little bit more in depth. So let's kick it off. Kathleen, if you want to tell us a little bit about your background and what makes you an expert in millennials?
Well, for starters, I'm a millennial, so I think it makes me an expert by trade and day-to-day practice. But a little bit of information about me is I have been working in commercial real estate going on 5 years now, specifically in consulting and research lines of business, which is usually unusual people hear for the industry. And in that time, I've dedicated a lot of the research that I've done in the studies to understanding millennials in the workplace, because when I started, we were the hottest trend and there was a lot of changes and people couldn't figure it out, but they pinpointed it. It was a generational change because millennials work differently. And kind of with that, I'm also a former co-author of Millennials and Millennials, which I actually wrote with Michelle McMurray. And our blog was mainly focused on dispelling rumors and myths that people could put out there into the media, which I know we'll talk about in a little bit. And those topics that we covered were all the way from our debt and how we couldn't buy homes, all the way to kind of just millennial function in the workspace. And so between our personal experiences and just the research we've done, we've been given the opportunity to be able to share this with a lot of people, including our clients and our friends and even our family, and now everyone here listening to us today.
So curious, what was the response to your blog?
Yeah, so when we were writing it, we actually got a lot of traction. So when it finally came to a close, we were kind of sad, but a lot of people started responding, and we took a different approach. I'm not sure if you've heard of the skim before, but our blog was not your formal white paper research. It was kind of, we wrote it with a little bit of tude, to say the least. And I think people enjoyed it because they learned a lot, because we put a lot of research in it. It wasn't purely anecdotal, but then we supported it with our experiences, and it was digestible. Mm-hmm. And people just were really receptive to it. And it was kind of cool because we got to be on panels and kind of speak out and share our experiences with the brokerage community, where there is a huge generational gap, as a lot of us know. So it was it served its purpose for us, and it kind of put us on the map to be able to teach people, I guess is the way to put it.
Yeah, and that kind of brought us to our CRE chat topic on millennials, because it is still such a big topic of conversation, and it's millennials and just this next generation has really changed the way we work. So one of the first questions that we asked on our Twitter chat was what the impact that millennials have on our work environment.
Yeah, so a lot of the changes that we've seen just kind of in terms of office trends in general is we've seen a lot of collaboration open space. And that's been attributed to the fact that millennials, and I also want to recognize Gen Xers, because they started out with this trend, but we were fully in this trend as well, where we had team projects and we had to be flexible and agile. Like with working with a team, you have to be able to go anywhere, anytime, and work with pretty much anybody to get the job done. In every group, there's always that person who might let you down, kind of homage to our college experiences, I'm sure. But that habit and that trend kind of just followed us into work. And that's just what we were good at. And so because of that, we've seen a reduction in a lot of square footage for people, because when you have an open space, you don't need as many walls to separate people. And so a lot of businesses in general embrace that ability to, because it embraces diversity and groupthink and collaboration. You have more ideas on the floor. So having a generation that's like great at that, a lot of people took that and ran with it. Another trend that millennials brought is they showed that they're willing to work longer and harder if they don't have to leave their desks or have to leave the office to get certain amenities. So you'd see a lot of amenity packages where you work into an office like a Google or a Facebook as an example, and they'll have drinks and a food hall and office activities and team bonding and after hours things. And so that's also kind of way to subsidize pay. It's like, hey, you don't have to use your own pocket money to like do these things. So millennials are just really receptive to all that. And we've seen that, and it's not only changing the office footprint, but also office culture as well.
Do you think also, Kathleen, it's changing where people locate their offices? Because you talk about amenities, and I'm sitting here in downtown Nashville looking out. I see people walking around off Second and Broadway, and so I just wonder if that's also, when I first got started in the business, a lot of people were wanting to be out in the suburbs, but it seems that there's a big shift that a lot of companies are moving offices downtown because they're trying to attract millennials into their kind of workforce.
Yeah, that was actually one of the things that before I moved to Chicago, that Michelle and I were trying to analyze, was just this onset of urban migration. And it's actually really interesting is in urban infills, it's not just millennials who were kind of going to downtown locations, but baby boomers who are now empty nesters. So it's been two generations actually impacting that shift. But one big thing about millennials is they tend to be a little bit more socially conscious. So it means to be sustainable. I actually live in downtown Chicago myself, and speaking from my personal experience, I really like the fact that, yes, I do have a car because I need to be able to access the suburbs, but I walk to the grocery store and I walk to the movies and I walk my dog to the park. I can walk to the lake, which is down the street. So it's convenience, and the amount of time I save is just, it blows my mind. And I think, a lot of millennials also were taught in college and growing up that time is money. And so able to save time where you're not having to hop in a car, commute an hour both ways, you get that time back. And then you are able to also have that, work to life balance. And I think that's also where that term live, work, play comes into, I hate to say live, work, play comes into play because it's so too many uses the word of play. But ultimately, I think it's just appealing because you get time back by all the conveniences of having your work down the street. Like I have to go to two offices, my employer's and my client's office, and I live an 18-minute walk from both locations. So, wow. So I'm living kind of that. I'm living downtown and I get my life back because I can just roll out of bed at 8 and get to my client office at 8:20. So
yeah,
like this sometimes, but that.
Well, Kathleen, you made a great point about everybody's kind of walking a little bit further. They're working longer hours, you said, but there's this common misconception that millennials are lazy. Is it true? Is it a stereotype? What's going on with millennials being lazy?
Yeah, so that is definitely a misconception, and I can't excuse everyone in our generation because in every group there's always people who are actually true to the stereotype. But I think that millennials have been typecasted as lazy because they like to be more efficient, and they push back on things that they don't think need to be done a certain way when it takes too much time. And so what I always remind people is that it's easier to be negative than to embrace something that's a change from what you're used to. So instead, millennials are lazy, disloyal, and entitled, but really they're true to themselves. They've found more efficient ways to do it because a generation that's hybrid, during the technology boom. Google didn't even until 1998, and at that time I was 8 years old. So I didn't know, I actually knew how to use an encyclopedia, lo and behold. And then the entitlement, I think, is just misconstrued as us being more willing to speak up about our needs and our wants. We're not very quiet, and we seem to be a little bit more headstrong, and I think that's different. Most people are used to the boss tells the employees what to do, but instead the employee's like, hey boss, I think I deserve this because I see what I'm doing. I know my worth, and that's just a different workplace trend. But yeah, so that's kind of where I would go with that. We're not lazy, we're just efficient.
Efficient. Yeah, you work smarter, not harder. And I think,
Exactly.
and some of that lack of, I know millennials like a little bit less structure to their workday, maybe because they're more efficient with their work and they can get more done in a day. And so sometimes I think that can be misconstrued as being lazy. Because prior generations, maybe the generation before mine, they are very structured and very, you hear that term 9 to 5. It's really, whatever. If you're not in the office by 8, then you're looked down upon because you're not sitting in the office. But a millennial may be not present in the office, but they're working from home. They're working from home the minute they get up, probably at 6:30 or so.
Yeah.
It's interesting because we should bring up some of the other comments, and I'm looking at the recap that we put out on Twitter, and I do like some of the things that you're saying. I'm the only Gen Xer on this podcast right now, so don't hate me. But Barbie Ruder brought up a good point during the chat because she said I find it humorous that the negative attributes described to millennials were also ascribed to earlier generations. So I do remember starting out in the workforce and people saying similar things about Gen Xers.
Mm-hmm.
And I always knew. Most of the people in my generation were hard workers, and we were also doing things differently. I mean, we didn't obviously grow up. Technology for us was introduced later on, maybe in college or right after we graduated. Mm-hmm. But we are still tech savvy, and maybe not as efficient as you guys. You guys basically grew up with phones in your hands, but a little tech savvy. So I think it's true. I think each generation kind of is interesting. We're talking about Gen Z, Kathleen, which we'll do a chat eventually on them, but I'm sure they will get some of the same stereotypes that Gen X and millennials have gotten as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, kind of to that point, sometimes in some of my outside organizations that I participate in, I find myself saying something about the next generation. I have to check myself, and I'm like, no, I don't want to be like the people who judged me before they got to know me. And I really quickly before we moved on to the next point is on that Gen X thing. What I in my personal experience, some of the best managers that I've had as millennial have actually been Gen X. In the office environment, I've been in the office environment since 2012. Essentially, is when I entered the workforce full time. And in those 7 years, the transformation I've seen, just how I actually, when I first started, I had to sit at my desk and clock my hours. And if I had to get up and go to the restroom, I had to let someone know I was going to go missing for 10 minutes and account for all my time. And then now here I am 7 years later, and I'm talking to you all because I have the ability to work from home because the trust is out there. Kind of going to the Gen X, out of all the managers I've had, Gen managers seem to be the most flexible and adaptable generation that I have worked with, and they've been the most open-minded to embracing the millennial because they say that they're the forgotten generation and they feel that, but I think they paved a way for millennials to be able to do what we do now. So I just kind of want to take the time to recognize that because I've just had great experiences. I've grown as a person in the workforce because of these Gen X leaders who have kind of the punching bag a little bit. And I think without that wall being broken down slightly, we would not be where we are today with flexible and agile work spaces and these cafes that you can just log and type away and work in the space that you work best in. So just kind of interesting observation.
Yeah. And we talked about kind of being more efficient and them working faster, working differently. What should millennials learn to utilize, or what sort of traits should they use more when working in commercial real estate or just workforce in general? Is there something that we haven't touched upon that they're not doing that they should be?
I think that, besides those points that you bring up, I think another thing that's very unique about our generation to come is the diversity. And the diversity isn't just, what we believe in politics or our skin color or whatever that might be that falls into protected class, but the backgrounds that we bring to the table, our socioeconomic classes even matter. And so the diversity we bring to the table is different ways of thinking. This day and age, we're always commercial real estate. We want to look like our clients. We want to be like our clients, but we can't do that if we only have one set of brains in the room, right? So if everyone has something to say, has a different idea, I think that that's something we can tap into and create a space where all ideas can be shared, whether they are, I want to say quote unquote, a dumb idea or a great idea. It doesn't matter. It's just embracing that collaboration, that ability to be open-minded. I think that not only us as members of the workforce will benefit, but I think that our employers and our clients are going to greatly benefit from that, because that's how ideas are created now.
Yeah.
Think tank. So
absolutely. And even diversity as far as what college or university you went to. If you're all coming from the same university in the same southern state or the same northern state, you're really not, your background is pretty similar and pretty the same. And somebody on our chat said that maybe that diversity even goes as far as what college you went to, what degrees everybody has.
Yeah, I mean, on that topic, I recently read that in the UK, Ernst Young is doing a practice where they're now no longer requiring a degree to apply for their jobs, because they're finding that your degree does not necessarily mean that you're going to be a good or a hard worker. I mean, using myself as an example, my background, so I do have a bachelor's and a master's in political science, international affairs, and a master's in criminal justice. But here I am talking.
I did not know that. I had no idea.
Yeah, and I went to one really well-known school for my master's, but my undergrad was at University of Nevada, Reno. And, people are like, where's Reno? Right next to Las Vegas. And I'm like, no, it's about 8 to 10 hours north. And so it's just, I think it's true. It's like, you never know who's going to walk through the door, who's going to do well. So it's just kind of, I've been welcomed with open arms into this industry by fellow millennials, having a very different background. But my cohort is what I like to call us, is they also took the time to teach me what I needed to catch up. So it's just kind of never discount someone, because you never know what they can bring to the table.
Right. Exactly.
100%. Well, let's move on to question 4, because it was a good one and had a lot of responses. What excites you the most about working with the next generation of CRE professionals?
The next generation, are we talking about Generation Z, or are we still talking?
You're talking about millennials. So
millennials. I think, definitely back on that diversity of think. I think that we're going to see a shift in commercial real estate as we start to move into leadership roles and get more senior titles and move out from under these, entry level roles, that we'll see that teams will be working a lot differently. I think that that's going to be something very unique. I actually currently have a boss that is a millennial, and I am not very micromanaged, but I work harder because she supports me in any way possible. So I think that experiencing that now, I can already see that team dynamics are definitely going to change. I think that, sorry, I'm just kind of blanking a little bit. Definitely more efficient ways. I think people are going to be scared off by that, but we are going to be bringing ideas to the table that are different to help us function quicker. And then the team environment is going to be a huge benefit to brokerage. I know that having worked at two large firms, I see the benefit of brokers working together as a team. And it used to be kind of an every man or woman for themselves kind of world because, you know, it cuts into your commissions. But I could see more business being brought in as more millennials are saying, hey, we need to work as a team to make more money.
Right. Yeah. And during our Twitter chat, Chris Kirk brought up about the difference in like creativity and innovation with the millennials also bringing that to brokerage teams and to their organizations.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think with those teams, it's just going to be, a whole new world. Like the game of real estate and brokerage is going to change entirely because millennials are going to change it. And it's not because we're intending to, it's just the way we work is so different than those who came before us. I could see like long-standing traditions of how to get a job. Like, you know, cold calling is never going to die and relationships are here to stay. Like those are the two things that make brokerage what it is. So us millennials, we need to learn better people skills to maintain that. And I think that that's one thing that's said that we need to learn also and can learn. But yeah, wholeheartedly innovation, creative, like the way we're going to market is going to be different. The way we call the client's going to be different. And how we even entertain them will be different. So
I think you bring up a really good point. I mean, I'm a huge proponent of being on a team. I'm on a 2-person team now, and it's, you know, when you have a good team and a good working, you know, kind of relationship, then it really, I can see how much better it is than I don't even see myself ever doing it, you know, being a broker on my own. And my teammate is a millennial. But I also think what's great about being on a team, especially a multi-generational team, is you learn from each other. So you were talking about, Kathleen, you know, people, millennials maybe need to learn more, you know, kind of people skills or, you know, how to communication skills.
Yeah.
And a lot of my communication skills, I mean, I think everybody does when they get in the workforce. It's a process, and you learn from the generation before you or maybe a mentor. But I think also one of the things that I said on the chat, Casey and I are a team here at CRE Chat, and Casey really has a way, like Casey has a totally different way of doing things, and she pushes our team to try different things, to do new things. And so I really like that she's not afraid to do that. And I think that's just part of I think that's just part of being a millennial, because she knows it's going to work. But I think being in the Generation X kind of category, sometimes we're scared of change and maybe need a little pushing to try it. So I think the benefit, what my point I'm trying to get to is, I think the benefit of having a millennial on the team is they push the other generations to think differently than we have in the past.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think it's just because we're so used to change. We went to school in a rapidly changing environment. Like one year you had computers and the next thing you had these huge Apple things that had color on it. Like we you know, I don't know if you had one of these, Casey, but there was a Nokia that the only game you had was Snake. And then 2 years later, Nokia was suddenly Snake in color. And then before you knew it, there was Google and then Bing, and you're like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And so it's just, I feel like change it's actually a safe space for us. If something's not changing, I think we start to think something's wrong and the world's slowing down. I definitely panic. I sometimes panic when there's not enough change. I'm like, what's going on? Like, am I not doing things right? And so maybe we're just kind of dialed into that a little bit just because we're used to it. It's just kind of a thought that came to my head. I was just thinking about that.
Well, and change is something we're used to, something that's scary for a lot of people. And millennials in commercial real estate, there's more and more and more. Our clients are turning in our millennials. They're the people that we answer to. Our bosses are becoming our millennials, people that we answer to. Do you continue to see this shift in millennials joining commercial real estate, and what are like the barriers, or how can we attract more millennials into our commercial real estate industry?
And let's talk about why, this is my favorite question on the chat. why are millennials not as drawn to commercial real estate as they are other fields? And
Yeah, so I think it was actually, was it Chris who brought it up actually about how the monetary structure is what drives people away, I believe. And that definitely is scary, working commission, not knowing where your next meal is going to come from. And there's only so much food in the office sometimes that's for free that you can live off of. But I guess I shouldn't be advertising that. But so for me personally, and for this, I really have to use my personal experience. And because of the people I associate with, people just don't understand what commercial real estate is and what it entails. I did not even realize it existed until I was in my second year of my master's program. And that's when I was like, hey, I really like this field. It clicks well with the way my brain thinks. It's a fun game because there's a puzzle and an analytical aspect to it. And I decided from that moment on is I would complete my master's and kind of just pursue something that was far to the left of what I had been studying. I wanted to be a lawyer. Like that was my end game. And I think that if someone would have just taken the time to come to my college and teach me these things, like I maybe would have changed my mind, because when we started, it was, you can be a journalist, a doctor, a dentist, a lawyer. Didn't know anything really outside of those four, or being a professor, because even the business schools had a very broad, they didn't really pinpoint down potential careers for you. The business school is always like, you can run your own business one day. And that's kind of why I think entrepreneurship has grown a lot too, is because that was a really big push when you were pursuing your bachelor's in business. But I just didn't know about it. I think that we could, as a commercial real estate industry, we could really benefit from putting ourselves out there by doing mentorship programs with college students, going into college classrooms, knocking on business school doors and saying, hey, can we come and present? Can we bring a panel of people from 10 different lines of business? Because a lot of people don't know that you have brokerage, you have consulting, you have research, you have facilities management, property management, occupancy planning, you have HR. People don't realize you need HR. So it's just this huge industry that's a multi-billion-dollar industry that millennials just are not informed about. And so I think it kind of falls on us to educate others. And I try to educate as many friends as possible, but they just don't, it doesn't click for them because they're now too far in their careers that it's hard to imagine. I actually did recently get a friend to do a career change because I was like, hey, here's this world that I love. I think you'd be good at it. And here she is now working with me in the same company. We don't work close together, but she's, here now, and she just didn't know it existed. And the funny thing is her background, she's an engineer. She's made the shift over and she's liking it. So I think it's just, we didn't know about it. So we chose these careers that were impressed upon us that we thought we had to do. And I think that a lot of firms can probably invest that time and money into that with their HR programs, and also brokerage teams who are looking to kind of grow and have sustainability. You can get it out there. And then kind of, I think another thing that we talked about was kind of the draw structure is kind of still frightening because draws, you owe people money. But what about being willing to do the salary investment? The sales jobs in the past, they've done base commission, base salaries with commission. And I think it's kind of like maybe that's something we can take a page out of that sales book so that we are showing these millennials that we care enough to get them in the door, that we can support them for 2 to 3 years without them owing a loan. Once that 3 years is up, is like, hey, we've trained you, you're skilled, we got this, give us 2 more of your good years, and they'll know how to fight at that point. So
yeah, that's a great point. And I think probably I said this, it might be a little controversial, but I think that's somewhat why this business lends itself to maybe kids who aren't carrying student loan debt, that have maybe a little bit more money to start off with, which to me, in general, that limits our diversity pool. So, as Diane Danielson said, exactly what you're saying is she says, the stakes are higher with the war for talent. CRE firms need to expand their hunt for talent. And exactly what we said just a few minutes ago, she says, new clients aren't baby boomers. They're, our new clients are millennials. We need to look like them. So So yeah, that commission structure was brought up by several people just as a big hurdle to enter the industry. But another thing you brought up, I want to mention, because you said your friend was an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
She got in the business, and it's interesting because, you know, a lot of the people in this industry didn't study real estate per se.
Yeah.
It's interesting because you can have a background, you can be an engineer and still do well in commercial real estate, and you can have a marketing background and still do well in commercial real estate. You can have a master's in, what is your master's in again?
Criminal justice.
Criminal justice. And be an expert on millennials in commercial real estate. So it's really cool that this field, in that sense, it's not limited to, like, if you're going into accounting, you have to get an accounting, you know.
Yeah.
So I think if we just put the effort forward, like Diane says, and start trying to recruit more people, then I think we'd be very successful and we'd find some great talent out there.
Yeah, and, you know, kind of on that point that you made too about kind of student debt is, I think about when Michelle and I actually wrote a piece about student debt. You look at the amount of student debt that people have, the last thing you want to do is enter the workforce and have to take a loan to pay your rent and use that same loan to have to pay those student debts down. So I think that the industry as a whole really needs to take a look at that structure and look at what their diversity numbers are in terms of those generations. And I think that it's just identifying those things, like you mentioned, Melissa, that maybe that's when the change will occur. Because another thing on the topic of Gen Z is, you know, I have siblings who are kind of on the far end of the millennials, and they're taking more of a non-traditional route than I did. I have a sister who's at trade school. I have a brother who decided that college was not for him, but he's still doing well in what he's doing. And it's just kind of something to consider. Is just like, we're going to attract millennials now, and how are we going to attract this next generation who's doing things completely different? Is there a middle ground? And I think that, you know, that point you say is just like, people are going to have different debts different ways. And how can we support that? So.
And maybe it's some kind of assistance program to help pay student loans. I know a lot of companies, you know, have programs set up to do that. But I mean, this is basically leading us into our sixth question, which is how could we recruit more millennials into the industry? So, I mean, we already talked about it. I mean, your answer, you know, you say one of the biggest misconceptions about our degrees is that we have to work in specific fields. However, commercial real estate is one of the most diverse businesses that accepts all degree types. So, you know, we basically, sorry, I covered that before we got to it. I didn't realize, you know, I had forgotten that we had talked about that on that question, but some type of, maybe a special package that you give a student, you know, coming out of school that, I like the idea of like maybe a straight salary for a couple years and then letting them, you know, as they're kind of learning and becoming an apprentice and setting them free. But I do get it, because I get kind of the flip side of that being, you know, if they're going to join a team, it's hard for a team. Typically brokerage teams, and we're all entrepreneurs, right? So we have to pay, if we bring on a new team member, we're responsible for that team member. So
I think with that though is like the house has to benefits from the millennial doing well, right? Or any new employee. So maybe the house can consider supporting that and not being on the brokerage team and creating. And I've seen different firms do kind of like a shared team approach where they bring on some entry level people and they base salary them, and the house kind of covers and supports them, but they still get a piece of the commission with the different brokers that they do deals with. So they can help you on a deal and you're like, hey, this is a great learning experience. And then maybe Casey's like, hey, this is another deal. I have a learning experience. So I think part of it that could be also a disconnect is it's coming out of your pocket to also support this. So the incentive's not there, because then you're dividing, you know, like, and I'm just shooting a number from the hip, is a 40 grand salary, you know, which is ideal for someone to want to live off of for a year these days, at least starting. And that's being I feel like I'm not sure what starting salaries are anymore, so I could be lowballing this, but it's like 40 grand. Like, you think about that, and that's a lot for you all to pay out of your pocket, because you have to make up that cost and then make your commissions to live your own life. So it's kind of like, I think the houses need to consider supporting your efforts, because ultimately, if they have successful brokerage teams, they're going to make more money. So the investment needs to come from the company as well, on that. And then kind of just other incentives, like that's an incentive. Another thing too is just kind of incentives for involvement and growth are always great. We can't always pay more money, but we can find ways to subsidize and supplement the salary they're making, whether it be like, hey, if you want to continue your education, just know that we're actually going to pay for your MBA program. Or, hey, if you want this certificate, that's on us because we value you so much. We want you to continue. And that loyalty, that disloyalty myth is then dispelled, because they will, any generation, millennials especially, will give back to those who support them and make those investments. Mm-hmm. They end up being disloyal because what happens is they ask for the support and they don't get it. And then someone said, and with the talent war that we're experiencing right now, someone down the street is like, hey, I heard you want these things. I'm going to give you that and plus a little bit more. And companies are taking advantage of that. And that's why some companies are losing great talent, and why other companies are just robust in talent is because they just know how to play the game. And they're taking advantage of it.
Yeah. And something that Diane brought up as well is that the ages are so different. So, of course, we have our millennials, Gen X, baby boomers, Gen Z is working their way into commercial real estate. And I believe she said the average age of somebody in commercial real estate or a commercial real estate broker is 66 years old, I think she said, which is older than like a funeral home director.
That's older, I think, than the oldest Gen Xer, if I'm not mistaken.
And so the ages are just so vast and so different in our industry, from researchers and brokers and everywhere in between. How can we bridge the gap between all these generations in our industry? What's the best way we can all work together or all learn together or learn from each other?
I think it's just that every generation just needs to recognize that every generation is going to have something on the table. And every generation has to be open to learning. I think that there's this huge thing, and there's been a lot of training in the workplace about it, is emotional intelligence. And I think every generation could benefit from having training and understanding what that is, because that's the way we're going to be able to tolerate and work together and learn from each other. And I think getting out of our egos and not having the I know it all mentality is going to help, because when someone comes fresh out of college, we think we know it all because we were taught it, and that we don't even know a fraction of what we're supposed to know.
Yeah.
And for those who on the older, the other end of the spectrum and in between is, yes, you've lived a lot of life, but maybe there's something up and coming that you can benefit and learn from too. So I think it's just open-mindedness and learning all around, and have just this emotional intelligence to understand each other.
Yeah, Liz Berthollet on our CRE chat said that a shadowing program would be good. So maybe the youngers can shadow the olders, and the older, more seasoned people can even shadow the millennials or younger people, and then maybe be like, well, what did you learn today? And somebody hopefully would learn something different or a new way to do something that would make work easier and better.
Yeah, and I think that that's a great thing that can be adopted, but something to keep in mind is if you do have that program, both sides need to be willing to do it, because I've seen it, inside and outside our industry, is the mentorships programs will get set up and you get paired with someone and it goes nowhere because the mentor gets too busy and the mentee doesn't even know how to navigate the water, or they're still learning how to communicate and say, hey, I want this. And so it's just, if that's going to be a way to cross-pollinate our generations, then everyone needs to be committed to making sure those programs work.
Right. Yeah. And even being open, some of the answers that we got were patience. I think anybody entering the workforce needs to have patience, because you're not going to get exactly probably what you thought you might, like right out of the gate. You have to work for it. graduating in the middle of recession is no fun. And so there may not be, there may not be any jobs right when we get out of college, and our career paths may change over time as well. So, I mean, like criminal
Guilty.
justice. I studied mass communications, and here you are, a researcher with a global firm, and I'm in brokerage, and same as Melissa. I mean, there's just everything's different and cross-generational, and we can learn from each other I mean, it's true. Everybody has to be open-minded to best serve our clients and work well with each other.
Yeah. I think it's just this overall willingness to participate. Well, I think any generation, we just get so set in our ways. You know, millennials like change, Gen Xers are scared of change, baby boomers don't want change at all. And it's just kind of like, you know, if we're expecting millennials to be open-minded when they come into the workforce and be patient with where things are going to go, I think that needs to be reciprocated through everybody.
And I do think that a lot of that starts with leadership. It starts from the top. So if you are a leader, either in your company or just a leader online, I think the more you talk about it, the more you kind of inspire that change in others to want to have millennials in the workforce. And Casey made a good point about the more patient you are with millennials, because I'm telling you, I've been in this business for, I think this is my 13th year, and I'm still learning. I mean, there is a long learning curve to this business, no doubt. And you tend to forget when you've been in it a while, how long it takes to get up to speed and up and running. Because every deal you do or every project you work on, whether you're a broker or you're in another department in the industry, it's always different, right? I think that's one of the reasons why people like this business, is because no 2 days are alike. You know, every day is different. But you also kind of, as someone who's been in the industry, you know, longer, and you're looking to bring on a new team member, you have to realize that you also have to have patience with them, because if you don't, you're going to expect more than probably what they can, you know, expect them to be like this expert in the field in a year, and that doesn't happen.
Oh,
you know, and
yeah.
it's funny because, I mean, I do see more schools creating real estate degrees, and more, it seems like a lot of, you know, kind of we talk about Gen Z, they're probably going to be the first generation that comes out. I don't know, maybe one day we require a degree in real estate, who knows? But, you know, there's not really a formal, when you get in this business, you learn basically by shadowing and by doing. So there's no like handbook that says study this and you know it all. So
yeah, I mean, I remember because like so when I started at a global firm for my first time, I didn't know anything. I didn't know what absorption or vacancy meant. I thought, you know, and it was honestly the best way. It's an industry that's great because it's trial by fire. I think a lot of other industries that what happens is you can actually learn from a textbook and then apply, whereas you have to constantly be on your feet, thinking, reading. And I was just sitting here thinking, I'm like, the funny thing about what we're doing right now is that we're actually, as we're finally figuring out millennials, we're on the cusp of everything changing again. And right when we have it, we think we have it all figured out, and we see all these tenants in the market changing how they work. We're going to be spending capital again in like another 5 to 10 years, because it's all going to be like singular pods where like computers are all around us. You know, one day the Jetsons is going to come to life.
I think it's already here.
I'm rooting for it. Yeah, I'm rooting for it though. I want the whole like, you know, George Jetson get up, like put on a helmet, and then I can work for a day or something like that.
That's great. Well, I guess this wraps up our podcast. This has been really fun, and thank you for being, we'll say, our guinea pig, for being our first ever podcast guest, Kathleen. This has been really cool, and we cannot wait to get this podcast out there and to hear feedback from others, and, you know, keep doing what you're doing. We always say, I mean, that kind of our motto behind Siri Chat is change starts with a conversation. So let's keep having those conversations.
No, definitely. Thanks for having me. And I look forward to seeing what topics you and Casey tackle next. It's, if I'm going to do like a shameless plug for the CRE chat, but I was kind of a participant in the beginning, and to see that y'all are now doing a podcast blows my mind. And thanks for creating this platform so that we do have voices to stand on. So I think without it, millennials wouldn't be able to speak up
Yeah.
about what we want. And I think that this is actually a good platform for cross-generational learning. So thank you for that and all that you do. And I look forward to staying in tune going forward.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, Kathleen with JLL from Chicago. And we will come up with the new topic for our next CRE chat and let everybody know what date that is. So thanks, guys, and have a great day.
Thank you.